So today we're going to plant some seeds. Now I've brought 4 types of seeds to show you today, just to show a little bit of variety. I have a really tiny seed in here, some medium ones, and a really big one, just to show a little bit of the difference that makes when you're planting. I've also gone ahead and collected all of my materials ahead of time, so I have everything that I need. And what I have for soil is a mix of mostly potting soil with just a little bit of seed starting mix, just to make sure it stays nice and light and fluffy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some water directly into this soil and mix it around. We want to make sure the soil is wet all the way through. And if you look here, you can actually see how much the level of the soil has actually gone down just from adding that water, which is one of the big reasons that we do this step before we're working with it. And now we have the soil at this point where it's darker and you can tell that it's wet. It's not soaking wet or muddy, but it's starting to clump together and it's no longer dry and falling apart. This is a really great texture to work with. Which brings us to our next step, which is just filling up all of our containers. And you want to fill them up close to the top, but not overflowing. Here we have our containers all filled with soil. And you want to gently press down the soil so that it stays together, and so that if you ever want to move this plant into a different container, you can get the dirt out in one piece, but you don't want to squish it down so hard that there's absolutely no air in it and it becomes hard and dense, because that way roots won't be able to grow through it. Now moving on to our seeds, here I have the biggest seed for today, which is a green bean, right next to the smallest seed, which is a turnip. Hopefully you can see how different seeds can be and why they can't be planted exactly the same way. And that is why it's important to check the details on each seed packet. Here it shows the depth, which is how deep to plant a seed. And then there's also lots of other information on here. So let's start with the biggest seed, the green bean seed. I'm going to double check the seed packet, and that tells me to plant it 1 inch deep. Now this is a great time to tell you the rule to remember if you ever don't know how deep to plant a seed. And that rule is to plant it 2 times as deep as the seed is wide. So that 1 inch makes sense in this case, because this seed is about 1/2 inch wide, so you want to plant it 1 inch deep, because that's twice how wide it is. Here I have this little tool to use to make a hole, but you don't need one of these. You can use your finger or a stick, or really anything around that size. I'm going to use this to make a 1 inch deep hole. You can always use a ruler and mark your tool so you know how deep you're making it. And then I can just place the seed right in here and do what's called backfill, which is just brushing the soil back over the hole to cover up the seed. And just like before, we want to gently press the soil down so it's firm, but don't press too hard. I also like to take this time to even out the surface of the soil so it doesn't pool when I water it later. And that's it! If you're planting multiple things, now's a great time to label your seed so you know what it is. I'm just going to put that over here for now and come back to it after everything is planted. Seed number 2 for today is a sweet pepper. I hope you can see that this seed is much smaller than the bean seed, even though it isn't our smallest seed for today. It's very thin and about 1/8 of an inch wide. That means we should plant it 1/4 of an inch deep, twice as deep as it is wide. And I double checked that on the seed packet, and that is the right depth. So for this one, since it's a much smaller hole, I'm just going to use my fingers and make a 1/4 inch deep hole. And don't forget you can use a tool to measure if you don't want to estimate that. And same as before, just drop the seed in, backfill the soil and even it out, and there we have it, a future pepper plant. Our third example is cilantro. Fun fact, if you've ever had the spice coriander, that is actually just the ground up seed of a cilantro plant. So if you plant just this seed, you would get the herb cilantro, and if you ground this seed up and put it on food, you would get the spice coriander. But back to planting. Even though it's a completely different look than a pepper seed, a pepper seed and a cilantro seed are both about the same width. So this seed will also be planted about 1/4 of an inch deep, since it is 1/8 of an inch wide. And again, I just double checked that on the packet, and that is correct. Last but not least, we have our smallest seed of the day, the turnip seed. Now, this is not the smallest seed there is, but it's definitely one of the smaller ones, and it's the smallest one I brought today. It's only about 1/16 of an inch wide, so it should only be planted about 1/8 of an inch deep, which is really just barely buried at all. Because of that, the biggest difference when you're working with a seed this small is that you have two options. You can either, 1, make a hole the same way as before, but just make sure it's really, really shallow. Or 2, you can do what I'll show you here, which is just placing the seed right on top of the soil, and then getting a little more soil and putting that on top of the seed. You just want a little bit so that the seed is still under about 1/8 of an inch of soil, but enough that it will stay covered, out of the sun, and won't simply blow away with a breeze or even your breath. Before we're done planting, don't forget to go back and give all of your seeds a little more water. Seeds really don't like to dry out. And until they sprout and grow some, you want to be careful with them. If I just took a cup of water or a watering can and poured the water in, I could easily move the dirt around and uncover the seed, or even move the seed itself, especially with some of these smaller ones. That's why a spray bottle comes in handy, or anything that can give you a gentle mist. That way you won't disturb any of the work you just did. And with that, they are all planted, they are all watered in, and they are ready to go. These planted seeds should now go into the greenhouse where they can get plenty of light and warmth and be taken care of. And don't forget to clean up.
All done.